and I thank you guys for giving me money to go take them out to eat. But then I asked, like, hey, who do you trust? You know, who would you trust? And they were able to mention two, three people at church. What I desire the most is that these kids, when they leave high school and they no longer have Mr. Mitchell there or seeing people there all the time, that when they get in trouble, they know where to go to you guys. That you guys are such a safe place that they can do that. We pray, we invest. I think the next step that we have is for us to take that step out and let them know that not just in the church, but in our home, is a safe place for them. Let's pray, and then we shall begin. We'll pray one more minute. Thank you guys for guiding us, for leading us, but above all, for putting us on the earth to reflect your character. May we not just learn, but may we live our life in such a way that everyone knows who has recognize it. And then with this we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Are we using? All right. When I learned that I was coming here, I sent a list of questions that I normally do to learn more about the place that I am going to be serving, right? So I can best serve you. And one of the things that impacted me the most from all the questions that I asked, and there were quite a few, and I'm so grateful that Pastor Juanfer, he answered all of them. But one of the things that stood out to me, and I wanted you to know, is that he said, Edwin, this is the most loving church. This is the most loving church. And that speaks volumes. Because if you are already loving, then you already done half of the work. Then you have all the potential to reach the next generation, because more than anything, that's precisely what it's needed in order to reach them if we have love for them. So I'm very excited to share with you this material that I think it will be helpful. But it's only helpful in the way that we put it into practice, right? I've learned through the years that a mediocre idea, well implemented, is much more efficient than a great idea that is not implemented, right? So I pray that some of the things that we're able to share, that you could put it into practice and that you see God using you to reach the next generation. Here's a true statement, not only of this church, but every church. Every church is one generation away of dying. Every church. If we don't reach the next generation, we won't exist. So reaching the next generation is very, very important for each one of us. And the things that I'm going to share, some of them have been learned through trial and error. And I think that those lessons that are hard are usually the lessons that we remember the most, right? Those lessons that are very hard. I have 3 boys, which I love with my heart. I love to having boys because they used to mow the lawn and wash the dogs and all of that good stuff. But now they went off to college. My oldest one's already married. We have a 3-year-old granddaughter. And my 2 youngest ones are still in university, so I have to do all the mowing and washing the dogs and all that stuff now. But I loved having my boys and enjoying them. So every time I have the opportunity to lead a church or plant a new church, I always do it with them in mind, wanting them to also have a church that they feel proud of, that they feel loved, they feel challenged, and that they want to bring those people around their circle to their church. I want them to be excited, happy to bring the people around them. So, and within Adventism, one of the things that I think it's helpful for us to understand that what's going to reach the next generation is not a program, but it's the proximity in which we are with people as we lead others to Jesus. Jesus called us to make disciples, and programs don't make disciples. Disciples make disciples, right? But at times, programs can become king. Programs can be so important, so prevalent for each one of us that, for example, if I go to a new church and I realize that their youth program, is not reaching people, I realize that their youth program is not blessing the community, actually the young people are leaving, and I tell the church, hey, from now on, we're going to cut this program. We're not going to have this AY program anymore. You better be sure that if I do that on a Sabbath, on Monday, they were going to call a conference president. They cut our program. But if I get to the church and that church is losing its young people, hasn't baptized, hasn't reached out to anyone in the community, no baptism, no growth, actually it's losing young people, and there's barely any young people in the program, you know who's calling the president? No one. Because the program is king. So when we're talking about reaching the next generation, we have to put in our minds and be assured, okay, this is not a program. What young people, next generation are expecting is not a program. So I'm going to share some principles that next generations are expecting that we could put into place that doesn't have to do a lot with programs, but it has to do with proximity of how do we engage with those young people that are around us. Number one is to unlock key chain leadership. Unlock key chain leadership. What does that mean? That instead of hoarding leadership positions and being there for years and years and years, that we're able to pass the baton quick. And the earlier, the better. That we're intentionally passing the baton quick to other people. So we want to have the young next generation, have them lead the real things. Not only the youth things, but actually the real things. So growing churches give away their influence, not only their responsibility, but also the influence and the authority fast, early. And this is very, very important. So when we look at our church organization, our boards, our committees, where are the young people? Let's give them a place at the table immediately. Let's let them know that we want to hear them. And in order to do that, we need to start with relationships. We need to start trusting them. We need to give them the keys of the church. Say, okay, this is great that you're a part of, but you're not only a part of, you are also a leader here. And be able to do it without strings attached. Not bait and switch, but no agendas, hidden agendas, just authentic desire to have them lead and to know them and say, okay, we're going to have you lead. And that sounds scary because I remember my youngest, when I was teaching him to drive, it was a little bit scary. And here are the keys, and now he has the wheel in his hand, and I sat beside him, and man, that was a little scary. When he hit the gas too fast or the brakes too hard, that was a little scary. But if we don't do this, if we don't allow our young people to make mistakes, to learn in a safe environment, to fail, then we will lose them. So it's very, very important that we unlock key chain leadership, and that starts with trust. So we want to offer load-bearing roles to young people. What do we mean by that? We mean that they need to be roles, not at times. I learned this term in the last 2 years in the current church where I am. I've never heard it before, but the term is junior deacon. Junior deacon. And I was like, what is that? Well, we ask our kids to serve at the door, or anyone could serve at the door. But how about we give them big responsibilities, like let's decide with the elders how the next service is going to look like. Let's decide with it. Let's give them responsibilities that are heavy. So we want to ask young people to participate in making key decisions for the church and involve them. So we want to invite young people to lead major initiatives because we want their insights, we want their input, and we want their energy. So when we empower young people to develop new ways to serve the community, growth because they bring passion, they bring energy, they bring new ideas. And at times it is counterintuitive because at times we may think, well, the next generation, if they don't have a church, maybe we'll just lower the bar so they can come in and they kind of like it and have a good time. But what I'm going to share is completely counterintuitive. This is what was my experience in Portland. So let me share this with you. I was planting a church in Southeast Portland, and I heard that there was another church plant like 6 blocks away from where we were, and that they were doing really, really well. And I thought, And I talked to some of the pastors, Adventist pastors, as we were talking, and I said, I heard that this church is growing a lot, and they've just been planted for a little over a year. And they told me, yeah, but those are one of those churches that you just say that you love Jesus and they accept you, and that's why they grow. And I thought, is that so? So let me go visit. And I went. Portland, Oregon is a secular, very, very secular state. What does that mean? It means that people have never gone to church in their entire lives. Their parents have never been in church in their entire life. Their grandparents have never been in church. So church is not part of their lives. They hear about church maybe in media and movies and and news, but it's not part of their lives. So I went to this Sunday church, and I realized that they had in attendance around 700 people. And when I looked left and right, they were all young adults. And I couldn't believe it. I sat down to the service. The pastor preached actually a very biblical sermon that if we could hear it anywhere, we would agree with. And afterwards, I said, I need to talk to this pastor. How is it possible that a church that has been planted a little over a year has this amount of people, especially young adults? What are they doing? So I went to talk to the pastor, and I asked him, Pastor, let me ask you this. If I want to be part of this church, what do I need to do if I want to be a member? And he told me, well, I've assumed that you accepted Jesus. I was like, yes. Let's say I've accepted Jesus. I want to be part of the church. What do I need to do? And without skipping a beat, he said, hey, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, if you want to be a part of this church, you need to serve in a ministry. If you don't serve in a ministry, you cannot be a member of the church. You can come, you can attend, you can sit, but if you don't serve in a ministry, you can't be a member of this church. And I thought, wow, all right, what's number 2? He said, well, number 2, if you're going to be a member of this church, you're going to be in a small group where you're going to be discipled, and you're going to learn how to disciple others. This is during the week. You need to make time. If you don't want to learn how to be discipled and disciple others, you cannot be a member of the church. And I thought, what? And he said, number 3, if you're going to be a member of this church, you need to give your tithes and your offering. If you don't give, and you don't give your tithes and offering, you cannot be a member of this church, because Jesus said that wherever your treasure is, your heart will be also. And I almost passed out. Because here I am thinking, well, I am a pastor, Seventh-day Adventist pastor, and I have members that don't serve in any ministry, that don't like to be discipled or are in any type of small group. They don't disciple anybody. And if you talk to them about tithes and offering, they actually be offended. But you know what? They're Seventh-day Adventists in good standing. In good standing. They don't serve, they don't minister, they don't disciple anyone, they don't give. So are we saying that we make disciples that don't serve anyone, don't do ministry, don't disciple anyone, don't give, and we say that they're disciples of Jesus? Is that actually a possibility? Could you be a disciple without doing ministry? Without discipling others, without giving? At least not a biblical disciple. You can't. And I thought to myself, this is impossible. This is countercultural, because what is he doing? So here's what he was doing. He was setting the bar for the next generation, the younger people, really high. He was saying, this is so important. This is going to make such an impact in people's life that if you want to be a part of us, this is what you need to do, because Jesus' calling is over here. And at times we want to say, oh, we want to make it fun. Put the bar over here. Just make it fun. You'll like it. Come be a part of. And your people say, well, if it's easy, if it's not going to make impact, somebody else will do it. But if it's hard, it's going to make an impact in somebody else's life, then all right, I'm in. So I thought, okay, let me put that into practice. Let's see if that's true or not. And we wanted to plant a church in another side of Portland. And I thought of the best leaders I could think of that I knew of. Like, these were high capacity professionals. I had an architect, a marriage counselor, a store owner, a police officer, 2 teachers, an accountant, that were all in their mid to late 20s. And I wanted them in my team because they were people of character. They had good chemistry. They were very competent, and they felt called. So I invited them to be part of this team. And what I said, I put the bar super high. I went to call them, and for them to say no, that the bar was so high, just purposefully high, so that for them to say no. Here was my pitch to them, to these young people. We're going to plant a church that's going to reach secular people. But in order to do that, if you want to be part of this team, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, you need to be committed to bringing someone to Jesus, walking life with them to bring someone to. If you can't be committed to bringing someone to Jesus, we'll still be friends, but you just cannot be part of this team. Number 2, you're going to take a day of your week during the evenings, and we're going to go together in a small group, and we're going to learn together. We're going to go through a discipleship process. And this is going to be, you need to commit at least for a year. And number 3, we're going to go down to Florida. We're going to have this training, church planting. It's going to be a week long, and you're going to go take time from your vacation, and you're going to pay for it. And I thought, they're going to say no. To my surprise, I had those 10 leaders with me in Florida. We rented this nice Airbnb. And I remember when I went inside, I closed the door and I knelt down and said, Lord, you better show up and do something, because they actually came. They came. And time after time, as I'm trying to reach next generation, I realized that this is true. That if you set the bar high for them, you give them high leadership, like load-bearing responsibilities, more likely than not, they will actually live up to your expectations. But if our expectations are very, very low or no expectation, that's exactly what they'll give us. But if their expectation is high and we expect the best and put them in the best position to have success in a safe place, more likely than not, they will do really, really well. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like, key shame leadership. So don't just throw the keys of leadership to young people and watch them either sink or swim. We want to make sure that we are with them, alongside, providing them with the encouragement, with the support. And if they fail, well, All right, that didn't work. No worries. Dust yourself off, and let's just try it another way until we get it. So we want to resist the temptation to take over in an attempt to avoid failure. So if I'm driving with my son and he is pulling the wheel, and every time he's not accurate, I take the wheel away from him, do you think he's going to learn how to drive? No, because I'm going to be there every time. So he needs to autocorrect. He needs to be the one moving the wheel. He needs to be the one learning how to move forward. So key chain leaders are to celebrate the success with them, and when they fail, is to pick them up and place them back in leadership and say, all right, let's try it another way. I'm here for you. So we want to empathize with today's young people. We need to understand them before we try to correct them. We need to know their pressures, their doubts, their digital world, their cultural realities, because the world that we're living today in 2026 is not the same world than 1980s or 1970s or 1960s. 2026 today is absolutely different. It's crazy. But the same gospel principles apply today. So what we need to do, we need to understand. Be more understanding. Make sure that we understand, that we're listening to them. At times, I see that with my own kids. I see it in the church. And I learned from this pastor, he says that we need to change our how for something else. So every time a young people says, oh, pastor, oh, elder, oh, leader, why don't we do such and such thing? Instead of us saying, but how are you going to do that? How that's going to happen? Instead, we need to change our how for wow. Wow. Tell me more about that. Tell me more. What do you mean by that? The other day, my middle son was telling me this idea, and my immediate reaction was to say, ha, and I caught myself like, oh, wow. Wow. Tell me more. Tell me more about this. So we want to make sure that we're asking questions, because curiosity builds bridges. But when we criticize people, we build walls. We want to make sure that we're building bridges with the next generation, not walls. And in order to do that, we need to understand Gen Z. We need to understand the next generation. So at times we're still talking about millennials. That boat has passed. We're reaching next generation. That next generation are actually Gen Z. I have a 24-year-old, and that's just graduating now this May. I have a 22-year-old. It's graduating next year. You see, they are that Gen Z. So how can we understand them? How can we get to know them better? So here's a few differences that are specific to Gen Z. So Gen Z are digital natives. What does that mean? That these things, they were born with these. They've never seen a life where there's no social media, a world without computers and super fast phones, and they've never seen that. So for them, the digital world is part of their real world. It's not that that's a different world. No, that's the same world. Digital and real for them. It's real. So we want to understand them, that they're digital natives. They have shorter attention filters. What does that mean? Not that they have shorter attention spans, but they're filters. If you're not speaking directly to them, they turn you off. And for example, if we're going to reach unchurched people, right, younger people, and I have to catch myself all the time as a pastor, as a speaker, that I constantly preach when I say, for example, oh, like how it happened to Jonah. If I'm reaching new generation people, secular people that don't know Jesus, I can't assume that they know who Jonah is. I can't. I had a person tell me once, hey, pastor, this young guy, professional guy, says, I never knew that Jesus' dad was Prince of Egypt. It's like, what? What do you mean? It's like, yes, Joseph. I didn't know that Jesus' dad was Prince of Egypt. It's like, no, man, that's another Joseph. It's like, what? There's two Josephs? If you say things like, oh, like David and Goliath. I heard someone say, I thought that was just a figure of speech. I didn't know that was like a real story that happened. I thought it was a figure of speech. So if we're trying to understand them, if we're going to reach them, we need to understand them. They have highly visual communicators. So everything that's image driven needs to be high quality, because that's how their brains are wired. And the business industry and the marketing industry knows that. So they high quality, they try to do everything high quality to be able to communicate effectively with them. So they expect instant access to information. So if you're going to say something, make sure that you have your facts straight, because they can fact check you in a second. And if you don't have your facts straight, you'll lose credibility really quick. We'll go into the Q&A right after. We'll go into Q&A. So hold that thought. So they form identity partly online. So part of what you see online is who they want, at least how they want to be perceived. It's very, very important. They have a high anxiety and high awareness. So in social media, it lends itself for a lot of comparison. They have academic pressure, global crisis. They went through the pandemic, climate things, political division, constant news cycle. So all of this, for them, it's normal. So a lot of times they disengage from that because it's normal. They don't know where to find truth, because truth seems like everybody has their own set of facts and you don't know who else to believe. So for them, they are skeptical of institutions and they're open to relationships. So back in the day, people were very brand loyal. So now it's not like that. That's why the rise of non-denominational churches, because the new generations, they're not loyal to denominations. They say, hey, what's important is Jesus. And if I don't see that lived out in my denomination, well, I look wherever it's going to be lived out. So non-denomination, it's one of the largest Christians non-denominations growing in the States. It has a lot to do with how our next generation thinks. They are cautious about government, corporations, and organized religion. So they're skeptical about them. It's like, I don't know if we can trust these people. I hear things on the news. I hear things that things are not what they say they are. But they deeply value mentorship. They value personal relationships and authentic leadership. So we need to take advantage of those things to make sure if we're going to reach them effectively, then we need to be mentors, we need to have close personal relationships, and have an authentic leadership style. Number 4, they belong before they believe. And this is very different from previous generations. Previous generations, they said, we believe, like Seventh-day Adventists, we have been communicating for decades and decades, very logos, very information transfer. We have the truth, and I'm going to prove that we have the truth, and here's why we have the truth. But for newer generations, before they believe, they need to belong. Am I accepted? Am I welcome? Then I'll explore if I want to believe what you believe, but I want to make sure that I belong. So can people belong before they believe, or they need to believe before they belong? That's something that we need to ask ourselves as a church. And lastly, something that's very important is that diversity is normal. Is there normal? It's not aspirational. Back in the day, it wasn't as prevalent as you see today, from TV shows to movies where you have diversity all over. You go to the mall and you won't have a mall for white people and for black people or for Hispanic people. You won't have, it doesn't happen that way. Life doesn't happen that way. But when it comes to church, a lot of times our churches are the places where we are segregated. Where we have the Hispanic church, and I understand when there are language barriers, but what happens when we don't have language barriers? No language barriers, and all the Hispanic just get together with their own. And then all the white folks get together with their own. And then all the black folks are together with their own. And then all the Korean with their own. No language barriers. So no other sphere of life works that way. So why church should work that way? So that's very important. They're the most ethnically diverse generation in U.S. history. So if we're going to reach the next generation, we have to think, are we okay with having this type of diversity in our church? Are we good with that? So they expect cultural awareness, they expect inclusion, they expect social sensitivity, and silence on hard topics can feel like indifference to them. If there's injustice and issues happening all around us and the church is not talking about it and we can't get answers or we can ask questions in church, then they feel that something's wrong. They also, that's super important for us to know the next generation if we're going to reach them seriously. We want to take Jesus' message seriously and make Jesus central. Not peripheral, but actually central to everything that we do. If we're going to reach the next generation is not impressed by cultural Christianity. They're not impressed by political Christianity. They're not expressed by moral superiority. They're actually drawn to the teachings and life of Jesus. So are we talking about that? Or are we aligned more because of political views or moral superiority? So are we quoting Jesus more than we're actually talking with our denominational jargon? And I gotta affirm you on this, something that I saw today. In a lot of churches, most of the greeting, in most Adventist churches, a lot of the greeting that you will hear is Happy Sabbath during the Sabbath, Happy Sabbath. But if you're reaching unchurched people and you say, next generation, you say Happy Sabbath, what does that mean to them? Nothing. They don't know that word. It doesn't register. So when you say Happy Sabbath, it doesn't register. But today, when you, both at the door, I experienced it when it was the welcome and everybody that participated in the program, you said good morning. That they understand. They understand that you're welcoming them. Does that diminish the Sabbath? Absolutely not. But when we are able to say, on purpose, communicate with people in a way that they understand, then we're able to explain more and go deeper in what is it that we believe as Seventh-day Adventists. So that's very important that we keep Jesus at the center and that we quote him and we talk about his teachings more than anything. So important for next generation. Are people living what they preach? Because the next generation, they have a very sharp hypocrisy radar. They can smell it from a mile away. They realize, like, I don't know, these people are for real or not. They don't expect perfection, but they expect honesty. They expect honesty to people be who they are. So practical actions, for example, admitting mistakes, even publicly. When we share real struggles, not polished testimonies when we are the stars, but when we say, hey, here's where I'm struggling. Because it means that if you're a leader and you're struggling and you share your struggle, I'm open to share my struggle too, because I'm struggling. And if you share your struggle, you're the leader, maybe this is a safe place so I can share my struggle and somebody can help me as well. So this is very important if we're going to reach them. Practical relational discipleship. Now, let me stop there for a second. Let me ask you. When Jesus gave the Great Commission in Matthew 28, And he said that he said to his disciples that go make disciples. And he said, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. When in Acts, he says that you will go and you make disciples, and you'll go to Jerusalem first, and then you go to Judea, and then you'll go to Samaria, and then you go to the ends of the world. Who was Jesus talking that you will make disciples of? People that had accepted him already, or people that had not accepted him? Not accepted him, correct? He was talking about making, so when we're talking about making disciples, we're talking about reaching other people that do not know Jesus, that haven't heard the gospel, or if they heard, they haven't accepted the gospel, they haven't decided to follow Jesus. And if that is our commission, then we need to ask ourselves, are we disciples of Jesus? Because the disciples of Jesus make disciples. It's unexistent, a disciple of Jesus that doesn't make disciples. So we need to ask ourselves, if we're going to practice practical relational discipleship, am I making a disciple? And I would think that this is like Christianity 101, right? But it's not. Literally a week ago, I sat down with a pastor, and this pastor has an MDiv, a Master in Divinities, and I had to explain to the pastor that when Jesus is talking about making disciples, he doesn't refer of just us, brothers and sisters, encouraging each other, mentoring each other, helping each other. That's not it. What Jesus meant is those people that don't know Jesus, we are to invite them to follow Jesus and walk life with them in a way that they can also follow him. That's discipleship. Because in the context that I was sharing with this pastor that has a master's degree in theology, in the context, they were telling me, I think that all of my leaders see themselves as missionally driven because they lead Pathfinders, or they teach Sabbath school, or they're deacons. And so is that the mission? The answer is no. That's part of how we grow, but that's not the mission that Jesus said in Matthew 28 to go make disciples. That's not that Great Commission. So it's very important that we think along the lines of walking life with other people, especially the other next generation, not just information transfer. Because you know who could do that? AI could do that. AI could just transfer a lot of information, but that's not what the next generation needs. They need someone to walk with them. So what are some of the practical ways that we can imitate Jesus walking with them? Invite young people into your everyday life. Show up into everyday life. Study scripture with them one-on-one. Share with them. Let them ask questions. Pray with them, not just for them. Be consistent. You don't have to be flashy. Gen Z is discipled at dinner tables, at brunch, not just in the sanctuary, not just in the Sabbath school, but actually in a table when we come and we share experiences. That's what Jesus did. So if we're going to make Jesus central, that is what we need to do. We need to allow our people to address real questions without fear. And Gen Z wrestles with specific things. They wrestle with doubt, mental health, sexuality, justice, faith and science. So let them ask questions. Are we a safe place where people can ask questions? And say, hey, how about my gay friend? How about my lesbian friend? Can't they have love too? Can't they experience love? Let them ask questions. And you may not have the answer, and that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to say, mate, you know what? I'm still thinking about that. I haven't figured that out. I never asked myself that. Tell me, what do you think? Let them ask questions. So taking Jesus seriously means not avoiding hard conversations. On the contrary, leaning in, not reacting defensively, not shaming curiosity of the questions that they may have. So if we're going to reach next generation, we should also be aware if we're making a true, warm community. There it is. So belonging for them precedes believing. So can they belong? How do they actually belong? Churches that grow young create intergenerational relationships, not silos. And it's easy, churches, it's so easy to develop cliques, and it has nothing to do with age. You could have a group of young people and be a very close group where no one comes in. And there's nothing wrong with circles, but circles in churches are circles that follow Jesus must be open circles, not closed circles. It must be open. So immediately we see someone that comes in, we bring them into our circle. We make them a part. We allow them to experience friendship and leadership and gifts and talents and enjoyment and whatever the church has to offer. Because for then see, the next generation, belonging precedes believing. So church members can build relationships before debating anything with theology. You know, that was the way I was taught. I remember when I was baptized, I used to smoke cigarettes, and I had a horrible addiction to cigarettes. And the place where I was working, there were a few professionals that worked in that same office, one of them being a psychologist. And he said, "Oh, Edwin, I realized I haven't seen you smoking lately." And I said, "Oh, yes, because, you know, I met Jesus and I'm going to church now." And he says, "Oh, really? Oh, well, good for you. What church are you going?" "I'm going to the Seventh-day Adventist church." And he said, "Well, at least you're going to church, but those people are crazy with their Sabbath thing." And I'm like, "Really? Would you like to discuss that further?" And he's like, "Sure." It's like, "How about tomorrow during lunch?" And he said, "Yes. So you better make sure that I prepared to debate him next day." I had all my arguments, and I sat down with him with the Bible. And every time he would bring an argument, I would hit him with the Bible. And every time he would bring another argument, bam! And here I was, a 21-year-old, and this was a gentleman in his mid-50s, a professional psychologist, and I was whacking him right and left and right and left. And we weren't finished with the conversation and all that I wanted to share with him when he slammed his hand in the desk and he said, "Well, keep your Sabbath," and he left. And you know what I did? I ruined the friendship. And this was an older gentleman. So as Adventists, at times we want to prove that we're right, but we need to build relationships before we share anything with people. That's what Jesus did. Ministry of Healing, page 143, it says, true success, that only the method of Christ will bring true success. Ellen White says that the Savior mingled with men like one who desired their good. He won their confidence, ministered to their needs, and then he asked them to follow him. So we want to do the same thing, mingle with people, earn their trust before we earn the right to speak into their lives. So we want to stay at the table even when there's disagreement. And boy, are we living in a time where there's disagreement. It is crazy. People don't agree. Christians don't agree. And we need to separate a person's value from their behavior. So because a person behaves a specific way, that doesn't mean that there's no value in them. Because we are all made at the image of God, right? So there's value in each other, regardless of our behavior. And we can't hold people to a Christian standard when they've never met Christ. So for next generations, it is very important that we make that distinction. Next generations need to experience you matter here. You're important. Young people, stay where they are known and where they are needed. So if we're going to reach the next generation, we need to ask ourselves, do we really know them? Not their name, not that we wave, not that we say happy Sabbath. Do we know them? And do they feel, not only we say that we need them, but do they feel that we need them? Do they experience that we need them? Next, we're going to prioritize young people. We talked about that every church is one generation away from dying. So young people are not a ministry of the church. They are a priority of the entire church. And we need to decide together as a church if that's true or not. So we don't isolate youth ministries. We integrate young people into the whole church. Because at times it's easy to say, okay, the young people are going to just do that. It's like we're going to leave this little corner for the young people. But this is the real church, us folk right here. Let the young people do their thing so they don't bother us. Let's do our thing here. So we don't want to do that. We want to integrate them in all different areas of our church. So we want to prioritize them everywhere. Where do we prioritize them? In budget, in programming up front, in leadership seats, in strategic focus. They must reflect that they are actually their priority. The board decisions, when we can ask them, hey, how do you think this decision will impact the next generation? I went to a church in California for a training, and they were having their building done, and we were meeting at another place, and we could see the drawing of the building and that was being done, and you couldn't really tell because the construction was starting, but the drawing was beautiful. And I hear that you guys are in that process of seeing your church done, right, after a horrible fire. So it's an exciting time. My grandma used to say, everything that's new, it's beautiful, right? Everything that's new, it's beautiful. And I remember seeing the drawing of the church, and I looked at the drawing, and I couldn't believe what they did outside of the church. Right in the sidewalk around the church. You know what they did? They did a skate park. It was like the sidewalk of the church was literally a skate park. And I thought, why would they do that? Next year, I went to the same conference in the same place, but this time the building was done. And I understood why they did that. Because they lived in a county where there was tons of young people, and skating was a big deal. So when I went there and the building was done, guess where all the young people were hanging out? Guess who was having relationships with them and getting to know them? The people of the church, because they built something that was not only inward focused, but also outward focused. So prioritize them everywhere. Budget conversations, do they reflect that we are investing in them? Calendar planning, considering the rhythms of life, leadership development, include them in that. If they are only discussed in our youth report, then they are not prioritized. If it's only a report for youth, then they're not very important. If we're going to reach the next generation, we need to talk about the next generation with expectation and not anxiety. Because language creates culture. For example, we need to make some shifts. Instead of saying, we're losing young people, we need to move in saying, we believe in young people. Instead of saying we're losing them, because that's then the culture that's going to form, we need to change our language. We can say, we believe in young people. We're here for them. We'll receive them. So ask yourselves, do leaders express confidence in them? They call them to leadership. They speak hope over them publicly. Very, very important. Now, prioritizing young people does not mean that we're catering to worship entirely to their preferences, that we're ignoring other generations, that we're abandoning theological convictions, becoming trendy for trend's sake. That doesn't mean none of that. It doesn't mean that. But we can prioritize them with influence, with investment, with integration, not necessarily a style. And lastly, if we're going to reach the next generation, we can become the best neighbors. The best neighbors. This is going to bring the next generation if we become the best neighbors. In order to do that, we need to stop asking, how do we get young people into our church? And start asking, how do we love the young people already in our community? Instead of how do we get them here, how do we love them there, where they are already at? Because if we'll love them there, we'll have them here as well. So we need to start loving them there. Where are they, though? Where are they? Instead of saying, come to our program, attend our event, we need to shift to, how can we show up where you already are? How can we show up for you? And that takes a shift in mentality. That's going to make us uncomfortable. Because change equals loss, and loss equals pain. So if we're going to change something, instead of just thinking about ourselves, what we like, how we prefer, how we've always done it, and we're going to reach people where they are, that's going to mean a lot of change. It's going to be very, very uncomfortable. You're not going to like it. You're not going to like it. But that is the work of the gospel. That's what Paul says. To the Greek, I became like a Greek. To the Jew, I became like a Jew. He spoke their language. He understood them. So we need to turn outward. Young people are inspired by churches that serve and impact their community. Mission energizes faith. I had the blessing of being part of a church in Denver, Colorado. It was a wealthy church, a medium-sized church. They were very wealthy, and they had a generous culture that inspired young people. Here's what they did every Christmas. They had a special offering that they collected throughout the year. And at the end of the year, they gave all the money away. So they were having, while I was there, they were having this collection, generous collection, and the board asked me, say, Edwin, you're planting a church in Denver, Colorado. Is there any ministry that's making a meaningful impact in the community? And there was one. It was Urban Denver Outreach. It was the Assemblies of God young person that he started a church there in the middle of 5 Points community in downtown. And on Thursday, he had 200, between prostitutes and homelessness, he had around 200 people. And he managed that all the high-end restaurants of the area would feed these people, and they would put like silverware, and it was beautiful. It was like the best food, and they had a great experience for the homeless and prostitutes of the area. And then they would invite someone to teach a gospel story for them, and they would minister to them and take them to rehabs. And it was so beautiful that this young guy ended up adopting the daughter of one of the addicts of the community. They called him one day, say, hey, are you Pastor so-and-so? He said, yes. It's like, oh, your baby's here in the hospital. He says, what? Yes, so-and-so had a baby, and they said that you would pick up their baby, that you would keep her. And he did. So this church, you know what they did? They said, hey, we want you to look around and find a ministry that's making an impact, because we want to give them a gift of $50,000. So I made friends with this. He invited this person. He invited me to give the gospel story. I served with them, and it's like, man, this is a very deserving ministry that would use this money in a very significant way. So I invited him to church one day. It's like, hey, I would love to invite you to my church. Could you come one day? And we figured it out. I didn't tell him what it was for, but when we were there, I told the church the story. I told the story that I've seen him live out. And we brought a big old check for $50,000 and put it in his hands. And his wife and him were crying, and everybody was crying. But you know what that did for the next generation? They said, I'm proud of my church. This is the type of church I want to be. So these young professionals there, they would give, they would bring people. They had a vibrant community because, my friend, mission energizes faith. So be the best neighbors possible. Serve before you speak. If your church tutors students or hosts mental health seminars or supports single parents or creates safe hangout spaces, help struggling college students with meals, whatever it is, you earn relational credibility. They believe you. They trust you. It's true. The church does not only give lip service, but the church actually does it. I want to be part of this church. I want to bring my friends. I want to bring my girlfriend. I want to bring my family. They will need to see what type of church this is. So we want to collaborate, not compete with our neighbors, whether it be a neighbor church. We want to partner with schools, community centers, local nonprofits, campus ministries, other churches that are also serving. We can serve together. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can come along together and be the best neighbors possible. Being the best neighbor means we are here to bless the community, not to build our own kingdom or our brand. We are here to bless the community, and that speaks volumes. That speaks volumes. Well, I was in a church plant. The conference president started talking to me because his 2 single girls started attending the church. And he would tell me, Edwin, are there any young guys that, that can connect with my girls? Are there any professionals, men of God there that can connect with my girls? And I said, well, let's pray for them, because he didn't want them to fall in love with one of these secular agnostic guys, from the community. But one of them started dating this guy that called himself agnostic. This was a guy that was living right in the middle of the city, that was making 6 figures, and he was in his very early 20s. But his girl invited him to church. And I'm so glad he invited him to church this one day. This one day, we had just started a ministry with Habitat for Humanity, and we were building places for these people, especially single moms that needed a home. And he was so inspired by that. He said, I want to be a part of that. And he joined the team of building, and he was good at it. He loved it. He enjoyed community. They accepted him there. That president loved me for the rest of his life because he was able to study the Bible with him. That young guy, he married his girl, and he had given his life to Jesus. So when we're talking about being the best neighbors, partner with people around you, partner with them. Being the best neighbor means embodying the love of Jesus so consistently and tangibly in your community that young people experience the gospel before they even understand it. That they can experience it. It's like, man, these people love. I don't know why they love this way, but they love. And when they experience that, and then you explain why is it that you love that way, it makes sense. It speaks to their hearts. Lastly, friends, growing churches don't chase trends. They give young people meaningful responsibility, authentic relationships, and clear mission centered on Jesus. A clear mission centered on Jesus. So I share this with a lot of love, knowing that God is going to do something very special through your ministry, through this church. I'm excited to see what God will do. If you have any questions or comments, this is a good time. I know that my brother had a question here. If you had a question or comment, this is a good time to share. The next 10 minutes? All right, next 10 minutes.
What you said about, people's knowledge of the Bible. I came to a fuller appreciation of this when I have a ministry where I play as a street musician in touristy places, and then people come to tip me, and they see that I have a table with books. So I was, giving books and stuff, and so I decided to work with the Steps to Christ, and that was in my home country, and then I decided that I would translate the Steps to Christ. And that's when I discovered that the Steps to Christ actually has a bunch of references that are just in passing, references to this and to that of the Bible. And I'm going, these people have no clue what that means. They don't know the Jonas, like you said, They don't know who David was. They don't know this Bible verse. They don't know this jargon here. It's just, they don't know any of this. I need to take all of this out of these Steps to Christ because it has no meaning to them, So that's one thing that came I understood fully what you were just talking about.
For sharing that. Yeah. And one of the things that you'll realize that when you start talking in a way in church, using a language in a way that unchurched people that are out there that we want to reach, understand, are the young people that you're going to have are the ones who are going to bring their friends because they're thinking, they're going to understand, they're going to appreciate it. It's going to be helpful. It's going to be meaningful for them. So it's very important. Another question? Yes, here.
You're talking about including them with planning.
Yes.
Including them with decision making,
Mm-hmm.
valuing their input. I want a clarification as to whether you are saying, just to put it out there, when you have someone become the head elder who is very, very young, or is an elder. You said they think about people making mistakes and help pick them up.
Yeah.
What does that entail in your experience?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some of the other sides of it.
Yeah.
Where, we have a situation where someone makes a mistake and they're barred from ministry. Because of the gravity of the situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's that place of how you include them and not set them up for failure.
Yeah.
That way it scars them for life.
Yeah.
Could be a little bit on the funny side. Most of us cringe if we hear about a young person coming to a board meeting because it's like, that's not a safe place. In a lot of board meetings.
Yeah.
It could be a dangerous situation that may not always be healthy.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think that's a great question. It's a very, very important question. Of course, different people, we all grow at different rates and mature at different rates, right, in different ways. But if the church is sensitive to help and walk people step by step, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with church planting, because you're able to start a healthier DNA from scratch, right? And avoid a lot of baggage and things that comes, like, for example, church board meetings. Ellen White says that it should be like the spear of leading the mission, right? And it should be, we're talking about mission, reaching others. That's a beautiful thing, right? It's not something that we need to argue about, but then, church boards have become some other thing. But I'm going to give you an example of a young person mentored and that also messed up, but, there are also levels of messing up, right? So last church I was, there was this young person. He was 19, and he showed a lot of interest for the church, a lot of interest. And he decided that he wanted to study even theology. And a good thing is that he was proactive, that he shared his heart with someone, and that person told me, and we got together. I said, hey, why don't we, I'm so happy that God is calling you into this. Why don't we get together maybe once a week for us to share? Let's just have some coffee and let's just share some ideas. And we started doing that. He went into theology. We went and through this whole process, I was leading this new church plant. He went with me through the whole process. He graduated through the whole process. And when I was about to leave to my next calling, the conference asked me, so who should we put there in that church? And I was very concerned because this was a very young church. The average age of there were 33. It was the church that was baptizing the most in the conference. It was a church that had the most attendance. Their tithes and offerings were going up. And I didn't want someone to come and to stifle that, right? And I thought, here's this young pastor. He's graduating now. He's walked with me, and he already understands the culture. He understands the leaders. People respect him. They love him. He's a young guy. And the conference accepted doing that. The first few months while he was there was horrible. The first few months. And here's what happened. He fell in love with this girl, and it was his first girlfriend, and he was absolutely in love with her. And around the 3rd or 4th month that they were dating, she left him, and he went straight into a depression. And he was not showing up at meetings, and he was doing so bad. And some of the elders called me. It's like, hey, this is what's happening. This guy, we're trying to help him, but he doesn't allow to be helped. We called him. It's like, hey, man, how you doing? Let's talk. And he didn't want to talk much because he was depressed. He was very, very depressed. Started praying for him. And a few months he called. He said, hey, man, I'm sorry I didn't get your call. I need all the help I could get. And he shared what he was going through. We started getting together again, meeting again. He started getting help that he needed, going through a therapist, reading together books. It's been now 2 years after that, and he's doing phenomenal. This 24th, which I believe is the 24th is Tuesday? They're voting, buying their first building, and the conference they already submitted everything. It's an incredible, beautiful place, and he's leading it out, He made a mistake. It was not maybe a super, mistake that you can't come back, because there's some mistakes depending on where you work that you can't come back from, But the great thing is that the church that was there was willing to be with him, not only in his best, but also at his worst. And that's what we can learn from, helping young people. Can we be with them not only when they are at their best, but can we be with them when they're at their worst? Does that answer your question? Any other question? Comment? Going once? Going twice? All right. We're ready, Pastor Juanfer. Thank you so much for having me. There's my contact information there. I appreciate it a lot. Had the opportunity to serve you. I'm excited to see what God is going to do through your ministry. You have an amazing pastor that loves you a whole lot. He speaks only well about you. So I'm really, really happy to have this opportunity to share with you this Sabbath. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Edwin. Thank you guys for staying. I'm going to give you homework. Is that okay? Would you begin praying that God will place in your heart someone that you want to mentor? It probably will not be the person that you think you want to mentor, but the one that God places in your heart. And I don't want you to be thinking Bible studies or anything. Just be thinking, I'm going to take them out to eat, or I'm going to cook for them, or I'm going to send them text messages. But someone who you will be an intentional presence in their life. That's really what I desire for you right now. We're going to be building on the trainings and doing a lot of funny, crazy stuff. The most important part, if we can get just this one thing, if each one of us decides to take one person, not because you have to, there's no PFE. Like if you're just training someone because you care, like you're just caring for them, send them a text, send them a message. If you do that, that'll make a huge, huge difference. Tell them, hey, I'm praying for you. Like I'm telling you guys, I'm like the most awkward person. I say incredibly dumb stuff, but I think people know that I care. And that's really my success comes from people knowing that I care. Not because of what I say, because you all know how dumb I get when I'm up here. Anyways, saying that, let me go. Let me send you home so you can take your holy nap. And we love you. We'll see you guys Wednesday prayer meeting. Our meal is at 6 p.m. Prayer meeting 6:30. Soccer at 7. Let's pray. Thank you, God, for loving us, for being with us. Put someone in our lives that we can share, not just our holiness, but also who we are. May we share who we are in you with them. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Who's the cleaning group today? Anyone knows? What time are you guys coming? 6:20. All right.